mechanism similar to extraordinary relief where it had to be 7.5% increase, smaller amount because of the OSD. There was also had to be no more than 0.5% of your net school spending, which we don't have to get into the details. They also added in that it cannot be subsequently reimbursed in the following years. So extraordinary relief is Jay calls it free money. So we can receive extraordinary relief this year. So if our costs this year went up 130%, we could file a claim and get 100% of the costs, which are the differential between those two. We then get to claim this full year's amount next year. There was language in the statute as written, or as, not statute, but as finalized in the supplemental budget that I don't believe, and I've shared this with MASS today, I don't believe the intention was clear when the legislators wrote this, where they put language in that in essence said it won't be refundable in the subsequent year. Reimbursable, thank you. So where that landed is, and Jay Sullivan, who is DESE money god, is any money we receive this year. So if we file a claim, I actually think we would probably get some claim. It's not gonna be hundreds and hundreds of thousands. We could get some money back. Say we got 200,000 reimbursed this year. Next year, when we go to file for fiscal 25, it's actually at the end of this year to be paid next year, circuit breaker, say we were gonna get 1.2 million or 1.25 million, and we got 250,000 this year, they would take the 250 off and we would get 1 million next year. So in essence, what they're doing is they're prepaying, they're allowing us to be pre-reimbursed in the normal circuit breaker structure. So not at all what MASS and talking with, they now have Roger Hatch on, working with on contract, not at all how folks understood it was going to work. That is the way it's working. Not to report out to you anything to say, here's what we're going to do. We'll do some work to see if there's worth there. But I don't think it's worth, because we don't want to falsely deflate our claim next year when we've figured out a path forward for the current year, as we've been talking about with the Finance Subcommittee. So I just wanted to share that piece with you. That was, I would say, disappointing at best, because I personally do not believe, and maybe it was behind closed doors, because that's how things are done on Beacon Hill. Maybe that was the intention, but I don't think that certainly was the way that people understood. People were more worried about that. What is that threshold, and would you even qualify? People kind of didn't pay attention to that little language at the end. So just to share that information with, that is new information that we are just, I would say we learned, but we're just learning, still learning today. And just wanted to bring that to your attention, that I would say we're not at this point, again, not going to confirm that right now. I think we will land with, it doesn't make sense to do any kind of claim this year, because it would be offset. We would be offsetting next year's claims when we know we're going to need all the funding we can get next year. Questions?
So just to clarify, so this is separate from extraordinary relief, so you could still apply for extraordinary relief for this year, correct?
Could.
And
we wouldn't hit the threshold.
Oh, we wouldn't hit the threshold, not without the 14% OSD. Okay. So the options are either essentially be in the hole this year, but be made whole next year, fill that hole, right?
Yeah.
Or fill part of the hole this year, but then dig the hole deeper next year. Is that pretty accurate?
That's a pretty good summary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. So when we, right, the student we were talking about, that was 560 and I think ballooned to 579, who ultimately moved out of town, actually out of the state, that would have triggered us and kicked us into the extraordinary relief. Without that, again, there's calculating to do, but I think we would qualify for some relief. But it literally, there's no benefit to this, right? All it's doing is fronting money, which we want in a reserve anyway, right? That's the whole point. So it doesn't matter whether we claim it now or later. There was some discussion because it's 100% reimbursement, where there could be a way that they could do that, because this reserve relief is 100% of the costs. whereas circuit breaker is generally 75% of the costs, but because of the way Jay Sullivan confirmed, they're negating that entirely. Yeah. Say it one more time. Yeah, and what were you going to say?
Yeah, I'd say the only thing to benefit to doing it now is if we claimed it, held onto the money, rolled it over to next year, we'd get the interest earnings on it, which, some money, but it, yeah, like you shared, it was very disappointing to hear that it's a dollar for dollar on the revenue side of reducing it, not just the expenses. So
Yeah.
no real gain there.
Yep. And Jay Sullivan is notorious for being abrupt. But I mean, he was downright unacceptable today. So there were comments made in the meeting, and I will be emailing the commissioner because it's just, that's not the face of what they're trying to do. And it was so rude and obnoxious how dismissive he was to everyone on the call who was just trying to understand this. And he clearly, from the beginning, didn't want to do this. And that came through loud and clear. So there's that, not in the report, just to add that. For my actual report, just to note the adjusted budget process for this year, I just wanted to call out in my report, it's been corrected. I had January 16th in the first paragraph and then January 17th, which is correct. Actually, I had two places in the paragraph. I had one said the 16th, one said the 17th. It is January 17th, 1 week from tonight. To note, we were starting early. We're starting at 6 p.m. It will be a single presentation. The full leadership team will be here. We are putting the finishing touches on that document, and we will have that to you with the posted agenda by the time we go to sleep on Friday night. So it may not be early, but you will have that document by Friday night in its form so that you have the weekend to take a look, and then we'll be presenting that to you next Wednesday. So any questions on that, just to make sure as we go into that process, thoughts, questions? Seeing none, moving on. Just a quick update on our DEIB work and to focus on, I know certainly the work to bring the equity statement to life, and there's more work to be done there, but I know a lot of this has become embedded. The visual arts, we used to have the District Arts Festival. The performing arts haven't been participating, but last year and then again this year, there'll be a visual art, blanking on the word, they call it I think it's a gallery night, and they're using belonging as the theme for that night. So it is the concept of belonging, that statement is filtering into the work that's happening routinely, not in separate committees that are trying to make decisions that don't get applied, but in the actual real work that's being done. And one of the examples, as I noted here, the committee had set a goal of surveying the community on its quality school measures or school quality measures. That there is now a draft when I believe, I'm not even sure how much has been reported by the subcommittee, but when there was a small subcommittee of the school committee working on that, and then working with the leadership team, really felt like the best picture of that overall sense of how people feel that the school is performing, how we're welcoming and accepting, was to survey everyone. So that's great if we survey families, but in speaking with the leadership team, we think it makes sense to actually provide or participate in the staff surveys as well as the student surveys. So there is work to be done there. We're actually pinging a date and time to get that group back together. And we do now have a draft from, it's the UMass group, Education Commonwealth Project. I do have a draft of the family survey that group can take a look at, and then we can talk further about implementing. Timing-wise, I know we had a lot of discussion. That will be something that I think makes sense to talk about with that subgroup and bring to the full committee. But I think there's value in doing this concern, and this comes from folks who have done the survey too, with surveying at the end of a year versus at the start of a year. Feeling like that's a better time to engage with people as people are feeling good coming off the summer, a new year. versus in June when people are generally disengaging. So we can talk about that further. But we'll come together, and I actually like how the kind of work that we're doing as a leadership team with the work the committee's doing is coming together. Principal search for Salisbury, the panels are gathering together next Tuesday for our first bringing everyone together. I'll be sharing at that time the candidate pool. There is a good pool of qualified candidates. I'm pleased to report. Prior principal experience, newer experience, good broad range of candidates. So I'll bring the candidates along with, we'll spend some time with all of this. So be a parent, guardian panel, staff panel, administrator panel, kind of setting the vision, reviewing the data from the surveys that were sent out. I will then be reading them the Riot Act on kind of this is how we can do interviews, and it's always interesting when you bring a larger group into a process that is supposed to be confidential. You know, by law, we're supposed to be able to protect someone's confidentiality until they become a finalist. So do our best to make sure that we're kind of keeping that information contained. On paper, again, we'd then organize the interviews the following week to have the interviews, the first round of interviews, the final week of January. That's the week that I asked the interview panels to set aside. If the group felt like the week following or the week prior to that, so the third week of January worked better, we could bump that up a week. So all that will be determined, but all that to say we are on track. And I'm very confident we'll have a quality candidate. I'm hopeful we'll have a few finalists to bring in and go through the process of having them come in to meet with kids and then the staff after school and have the parent forum or community forums in the evenings, and have someone named by the very beginning of March so that they can come and meet you and be appointed, or I'm sorry, I appoint them, but be introduced rather at the March school committee meeting. So still on track and thrilled with the quality of the candidates that have applied. So feeling good about that. And then one quick follow-up, athletic director, I can now report here that Joel McKenna began. He was actually here quite a bit over the holiday break attending games, but official as of Monday the 8th. Comes to us with some great experience as an educator, coaching. Recently comes as the Metco. He's an academic coordinator for Metco for Lincoln Sudbury. So far, those who have interacted with him have had positive thoughts, feel like he's going to be a good addition. Again, just to reaffirm, we went through, it was posted, and he is appointed as an interim, which means his contract is done on June 30th. But as we shared with him and went through the process, it was a full panel of coaches and students and other administrators, so that we ended up with a thorough process to say this person could end up being the long-term and vetted accordingly. So time will tell to make sure or to confirm that, but I have confidence that he will make out well. And then, as you all know, Kyle is leaving at the end of February, so I can say, since I've written this on Friday, we have had some follow-up interviews with the particular candidate, and I would say, can't say too much at this point, but I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good like there's a possibility that individual both, A, would feel like Triton is a good fit, and that we would feel like that person is a good fit for Triton. So, and as I noted here, I do have a recently retired regional school business official who would be a great backup plan if we can't find the permanent replacement for Kyle by the time he transitions. I would feel okay about that, much better than the last transition we had. And so, but I also would use an opportunity to that retired regional school business official as a coach and as a mentor, and have a contract to have that person come in. And the person has town experience and very strong on a financial side. So feel very good about that, keeping that process moving forward. I believe that's all I have to report. One thing on the personnel report, and I believe Paul Goldner asked this question at last month about, it was specifically Julie Benson and how she didn't appear on the report. So we just tweaked the report a little bit, so you now have new hires and appointments, and then you have separation from service, and then you have transfers and new assignments. So people who, if they're, in essence, if they're getting a letter of appointment, they'll appear in one of those three categories, so.
Does anybody have any questions for Brian? Go ahead, Paul.
So Brian, I'm just wondering, on this extraordinary relief and the abruptness of the person that, answered questions, can we get a report, an updated report on that next month? Because I can't help but think that the MASS people are going to kick it around on their listserv or discuss it, or...
Yeah, so I reached, absolutely, yeah, so we will keep you posted, and then through the Finance Subcommittee as well.
Okay.
I mean, if it was going to be separate and similar to extraordinary relief, that's what it should be, right? It's a one-time offset for those costs before we start to get reimbursed, as Circuit Breaker does. Mary Bork, who is the co-executive director of MASS and who has been working very closely with Roger Hatch, I forwarded my exchange with said individual and said, hey, Mary, this is not at all how we understood it. And I don't know what the right phrase is there. She was shocked. So I believe, yes, there will be lots of discussion about this as to whether this is the only stat, right? So anything as written is subject to interpretation. We love Massachusetts statute. So subject to appropriation, subject to interpretation. We'll see if it changes, but as of this moment in time, we got nothing.
Brian, can you talk about so understanding that the AD was hired as an interim, but potential for long-term, can you just talk about kind of time frame on when a decision would be made and how you would go about making a decision on whether it turns into a long-term position or whether, I guess what does that look like?
Yep. So there is notice within that individual's contract of when I have to notify him of whether or not I'm going to renew. I would likely do it sooner than that. But I think there is no set process for that. That's not the typical path. So the plan as of now would be, unless we're convinced that Joel is the right guy moving forward by March timeframe, we would post it. And that's what he is expected. When he was appointed, and working with Patrick, it was I'll be appointed for this, and then I'll repost and I'll reapply. Obviously, it wouldn't have to be a lot of new interviews because we know the guy, but so that was the assumption that he was hired under. If by March we think, oh yeah, this is good, then we could just then forego that process, rely on the process we completed, and appoint a traditional administrator contract.
Okay, and if you opt not to open the position, would there be feedback requested from athletes and parents, families?
I hadn't thought that far, but I like that idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's hard to judge someone in a short period of time, but obviously people are interacting with him every day, probably, and pretty intensively during that time period. So I just hope that, we can take the maximum amount of feedback.
Yes, I would say, so, yes. It's always, we have to be more cautious when it's a personnel matter. And if I'm renewing or not renewing or hiring or firing or any of that, it adds a layer of complexity. I would say, that being said, rarely are people shy about, and any athletic director would be happy to sit next to me and hear me say this, not shy about sharing their opinions about athletic directors or other administrators. So, but yes, I think that's a valuable,
Okay, thank you.
good statement.
Does anybody else have any other questions for Brian? Can I have a motion to receive and file the superintendent's report for January 2024?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? The next item is the ad hoc facilities subcommittee. Last month, the district was informed by the Mass School Building Authority that the district's application to partner on a building project was not approved. While the district does intend to apply again this year, both the superintendent and I felt that we need to look more closely at some of the most pressing needs and see if interim action should be proposed. The school committee has done the higher level work previously, but this work would be down into the details. I want to keep any discussions very transparent and public so there are no misconceptions. The school committee can appoint an ad hoc subcommittee as needed, and I would like your feedback tonight on creating a subcommittee for this. My idea would be to have the subcommittee be 3 or 4 school committee members so that the meetings and agendas are posted, minutes are taken, and it is all available online and reviewed by the full committee through a similar process to what we have for our other subcommittees. I would also propose that we invite the member towns to have 1 or more designated representatives come to these meetings, and I was just wondering what everyone thought of, what they would think of that. Because with things going on with Whittier, we want to be as transparent as possible.
I think this is a good idea. We need, who knows how many years until we get accepted into MSBA. We need to be working on other pieces of this as we can.
I actually really like it because even if it's just a year, it's, you know, however many of those meetings that are open to our towns, that are open and can be talked about and discussed and put out there. And it will also share with the towns how serious we are about it, that we're not just coming up with it randomly, but like we're taking action and doing our best. So I think, especially in light of what's going on around us, putting another subcommittee together so that people are more engaged in it and can see it as it's going on and put their opinions in as it's going, and that way they don't build up either. They're not like holding their opinions back for like a big thing. They can put it in as it's happening.
Can I just add, one of the things, I certainly love this, support this, we had talked about was engaging with a consultant, whether it's a Habib, who obviously did a lot of assessment on this building, more than just we've got to expand our assumptions in discussions with the towns beyond just we're waiting for the MSBA. We're waiting for the MSBA, right? There is no viable path forward for a solution for this building that doesn't include a partnership with the MSBA. However, we may not be able, right? Best case scenario now, we hear by December of '24, we're welcomed in March of '25, and we fast track it where that's March of '30 before we have a building done, and on a 5-year cycle. So more like 6 or 7 years. So we're more like 7 or 8 years out. And there are things that, right, there are things that we'll keep living with. We can puddle, we can play in the puddles in our office and splash, and that's great. But there are other things that if the roof lifts up and starts to blow away again, you know, that was a pretty major repair. So I think it's as much about assessing with a professional, are there things that, from an engineering professional, are there things we can do that would be wise strategic investments and necessary, even if it means it's something that could be undone, right? We don't want to spend any money that we don't need to spend, right? And I'm not speaking out of school. One of the things I keep hearing people talk about is, where do you just put a new roof on the building, I don't know how many years ago, $10, $11 million. That was probably really needed. So we don't want to do a whole new roof, but are there sections that would need it before then? It may be. We might get there. And is there a way that, you know, the gym is a really problematic area. Is there the rooftop unit in there? We can't change a rooftop unit without changing the controls for the entire system. You don't want to do a roof if you're not going to replace the rooftops because they're rotting. You're going to put them back on a brand new roof. But are there ways, right? So our logic is that doesn't make any sense, but are there ways where they could say, no, you could figure out a different system just for the gym, and then you know you're not going to touch the gym when you renovate anyway. So it's starting to have those strategic discussions, both with those engineering professionals at the table, but also to keep the conversation going. I feel really good about the conversations we've had with our member town officials. I feel like they've been part of the process. They voted to approve our statement of interest when they didn't have to. But everything has been, yeah, we can't wait to get in. And that's on me, right? All of the language has been where when we get in with the MSB, when we get in with the MSBA. And we have to also have on the table the potential that we could actually have to come with a capital project before the MSBA partnership materializes. I don't want to do that. I hope we don't. But having a more public discussion routinely versus what Kyle, John, and I have on a far more routine basis, I think is important. So it's just generally discussed. And the towns have insight. And so I love the idea of it being a school committee ad hoc committee where any determinations and decisions you're making, recommending back to this full body, but inviting a town member, because it's not decisional, they don't have a vote in the decision, but just so that there's another voice at the table communicating back with the towns.
And before I ask who of the school committee would like to serve on the subcommittee, I think it would be best to have only one person from the finance subcommittee serve on this new facility subcommittee, since there will be overlap in the purview. But I think more than one person from personnel or policy subcommittees could serve. So, do we want to vote as to whether we would like to form this subcommittee tonight?
I mean, so yeah, do we have to? No, I don't think so, because it's not a, yeah, actually we would, because it forms a body.
Pursuant to the
That's what we
policy
do in
we just
June.
reviewed in the policy
Yes,
subcommittee.
I was just going to say,
Yes,
right?
we need to fix it, but yes, you need to vote.
Yes, we need to vote, yeah, because we have to vote
I
to
was waiting for
establish this
Paul to
committee.
jump in there.
Right? That is true. But I think it's also, I don't know how fast you want to get this off the ground, but
But at least if we
we can either establish.
on it and then
Yeah.
then I can go back with Brian and figure out how and when we want to start this.
Well, we need to know, I think you also need to know who's interested.
Right, I'm going to
Yeah.
have that.
I was going to say, follow your normal subcommittee process. If you're interested, let Linda know.
Right.
Come back in February with the names
I have
to a
it
vote to
even
establish.
before that. I have January 19th.
Oh, that's right, we're meeting every 5 hours from here on forward. So yes, let's do it let's do it tomorrow.
So I just would like somebody as soon as possible if they are interested. So I give them, a week to decide, so.
Fair.
So can I have a motion to vote that we establish this facilities ad hoc committee?
I'll make a motion to take a vote to establish a committee, ad hoc facilities committee.
I think
I
you got to get
said
rid of
that
ad hoc. And just, yeah, it's just a facility subcommittee of the school committee, right? Yeah.
Still the motion.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, and as Brian said, I would like to fall back to our usual subcommittee appointment process and have anyone who is interested, please email by January 19th that you would like to be part of that committee. Okay, the next item is policy review, section A. I will hand this to Paul Goldner.
We approved this at a first reading on December 13th. We're looking for a vote to approve these as a second and final reading.
Can I have a motion to approve edits to the policy manual, section A, as presented as a second and final reading?
I'll make the motion.
Second the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The next item is the subcommittee reports, policy and advocacy. Paul Goldner.
We met earlier today and reviewed many of the Section B policies, including formation of subcommittees. So we'll be seeing updated policies on that when we complete Section B, hopefully next month. We're meeting again next month, February 7th, we will also be discussing a school committee newsletter that would be going out to the communities that we hope to get out at the end of February or beginning of March at that meeting.
Thank you, Paul. The next is Finance, Paul Mayette.
At our last meeting, the news continued to be grim, as I'm sure we'll spend the next forever Wednesdays seeing and discussing. I think the biggest thing of note in the last meeting was the expectation that the circuit breaker reserve is likely to be fully expended and depleted this year, which is unfortunate. I think we did a nice job of, as a committee, of managing to build that back up with the ESSER funding and all of that, but I'm at least glad we were, conservative enough to have it in place, and hopefully we'll see brighter times ahead. Our next meeting is scheduled to be the 25th, but I screwed that up, so we're working on finding the correct date.
Can I just add one positive note to make us feel a little better about depleting that? So as I've been, I don't know if I mentioned it in my report, there's several other sitting school business officials that I've spoken with that have kind of reached out saying, kind of teasing, seeing if there's interest there, teasing that out, as well as folks from the town side. And as I've had conversations with folks about our finances, I don't know if you've had this with other folks from the districts, there are lots of other districts that are doing the exact same thing, that went through COVID and felt so good about their reserves and have now reverted. So it is not a unique Triton phenomena. And I don't say that to defend what we, that we're spending money differently. It's just, it was the nature of the beast that everyone's shifting back to kind of pre-COVID, having those reserves is not normal and sustainable. Not a reserve, that's a revolving. That's not a reserve. Stabilization is a reserve.
Thank you, Paul. The next item is personal negotiations. Susanna?
We don't have any future meetings scheduled at this point.
Okay, our next meeting will be the first budget presentation meeting next Wednesday, January 17th. Please remember that this will start at 6 a.m., 6 p.m. It'll be 6 p.m. rather than a start of 7 p.m. And I will say this will probably go down in history as the fastest school committee meeting ever. I also want to thank everybody. I mean, I know that the two Pauls and Susanna are on one ad hoc committee already, and the work that we do, I appreciate everything that everybody does. It takes a village. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Wow.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
All those in favor? Oh, any discussion? All those in favor? Have a nice evening.